Again, how's everybody doing tonight? Here in RPC, Ferguson, so great to see everybody as well. Well, I'm excited. I'm ready to get right into it today. And I want to ask you guys, who likes being comfortable? Keep those hands up nice and high. Some of you didn't raise your hands. You may be uncomfortable right now raising your hand. That's fair. Whether you're sitting on a couch, you ever find a good couch like this one right here? You got a good couch that you like sitting on at your house. Maybe it's a special chair. But everybody likes being comfortable. We all like being comfortable. Well, tonight, I want to tell you that there's blessing in being uncomfortable. I'm going to say it again. There's a blessing in being uncomfortable. Are you ready to get uncomfortable? I'm going to ask you again, are you ready to get uncomfortable? Yes. Right, I was like, cool, I'm going to start taking this off. You guys are like, whoa, not like that. That's not what I meant. There's a account in the Bible they're going to throw up, but it's I'm going to set it up for you. Jesus is going around, ministries hitting, right? JCM is on the move. That's Jesus Christ Ministries for some of you guys. So JCM is moving. Things are going well. And now all of a sudden, he gets invited to a Pharisee's house. And that's where we're going to pick it up. It's in Luke 7, verse 36. It says, one of the Pharisees asked Jesus to have dinner with him. So Jesus went to his home, and he sat down to eat. When a certain immoral woman from that city heard he was eating there, she brought a beautiful alabaster jar filled with expensive perfume. So I want to set this for you. Now he's going into a Pharisee's house, and at the time, if you don't know what a Pharisee at the time, these are people who are the rulers. They make sure the laws of their religion and everything are followed. And they're at one of these guys' house. And it says, immoral woman from the city. She's a hooker. That's what she was. Some of you guys are wondering. Some of you guys are like, what was she? Clear it up for you real quick. She's an immoral woman, and she hears that Jesus is in this guy's house. She has no right to be in the house. She shouldn't be in the house at all, but she hears that he's in the house. Verse 38 says, then she knelt behind him at his feet, weeping. Her tears fell on his feet, and she wiped them off with her hair, and she kept kissing his feet and putting perfume on them. Now, some people are like, well, how is she kneeling behind him when he's sitting down and eating? And it doesn't make sense, right? But I want to set this up for you just really quick so you can understand is in those days they'd sit it down, and they had what they would like recliners, right? So picture Jesus is eating on like this, all right? So like he's eating like this. Does that make sense? So she comes from behind him to start washing his feet. This is so you look at me like real serious. This is a pretty uncomfortable situation. Okay, let's gather the facts. She's at a Pharisee's house, and a hooker comes in. Jesus is preaching, everybody's loving Jesus, and she comes in from behind him and starts weeping and crying and washing his feet with her tears and her hair. Imagine if you're at that table. You're not Jesus and you're not the Pharisee. You're just a random dude who got invited over for dinner. You show up to somebody's house and everyone's sitting around in the living room, and just a random lady comes walking in and starts crying and washing someone's feet with her hair and her tears. It's pretty uncomfortable for everybody involved. It's really uncomfortable for her. She knew something had to change. She knew that something had to change. Something had to change in her life. But in order for the change to happen, she was going to have to get uncomfortable. She could have stayed doing what she normally was doing, but she knew, wait a second, I've heard about Jesus. Listen, it might have been uncomfortable for you to show up tonight. Right? You worked. Maybe you're at RPC Ferguson. You worked here. You worked. Now you got to deal with traffic. You got to deal with your coworkers today. You ever thought to yourself, I just need to get to church or I'm going to kill all these people? Right? It's uncomfortable. She's uncomfortable. Yeah, I was thinking back as I was preparing for the message, I was thinking back when my boys were younger. They wanted to play basketball and, excuse me, and so they had to do, it was uncomfortable, right? It was easy to do things a certain way, but in order to achieve success, they had to change the way they were doing it and get uncomfortable. They couldn't keep doing the thing over and over that wasn't gonna produce the result, so they had to get uncomfortable. And there were many days that they'd be like, hey, can I just do the layup this way? Or can I just shoot this way? And I was like, no, you cannot. You're gonna do it this way. This is the right way to do it. Yeah, but I don't like doing it that way. You ever told God that before? I don't like doing it your way. God's like, pray for your enemies. And you're like, I kill them. It's easier just to hurt people. He's like, love your enemies. You're like, no, I want to do it my way. But there's a blessing on the other side of being uncomfortable. For my boys, just recently, their team won the district championship for their school. There was a blessing in being uncomfortable. So there's a blessing that happens, but being uncomfortable is tough. In order to get something different, it's gonna cause us to be uncomfortable. Isaiah 1:19 says, if you're willing and obedient, you'll eat the good of the land. Now, I love that scripture. I love that scripture because the if is all on us. It's if you are willing and obedient, you'll eat the good of the land. If. Well, if you're not, you won't. Some of you guys are like, what's gonna happen next? You won't. That's how that works. But it's uncomfortable. See, being comfortable, here's what I realized with comfortability. I think to myself, I know how to handle this situation. Being comfortable, I know how to handle this situation. I know what to expect. They got this couch up here because I was thinking about it and I thought, have you ever just wanted to sit on the couch? You ever just had one of those days where you're just like, I just need to sit on the couch. And then it gets comfortable. And you suddenly went from sitting on the couch to like, kind of, some of you are wondering what this is because I'm bald and I sweat like crazy. So they put that up there. Very sweet. So then have you ever just been like, oh gosh, oh. And have you ever done what I've done and you start thinking to yourself, I got a lot of stuff to do today. Have you ever started listing out the stuff you have to do while you're laying on the couch? And then what's the worst thing you can do while you're laying on the couch? Pull out that phone, boy. You know what I'm saying? You're like, well, let me see what's going on in the TikTok world. Let me see what's going on Instagram. And then you see somebody and you're like, she don't look like that in real life. Church people out here lying to people like that. Deception, that's terrible. But laying on the couch is good for a moment. But can I tell you something? Here's what it says. If you laid on the couch and you were comfortable, and you did that all the time, and you just laid there, that's all you did, just being comfortable, and you never got up and you were just being comfortable, after 1 month, you'll have muscle atrophy and weight gain or weight loss. Ain't that the truth? Cardiovascular decline. Your mood and mental health will change and you'll have issues. Just being comfortable, laying on a couch. After 6 months of laying on the couch, not doing nothing, you'll have severe muscle loss, bone density loss, heart and lung weakness, bed sores. Now this is crazy. A year of just laying on the couch being comfortable. A year. Near complete loss of mobility, organ dysfunction, and increased risk of death. Can I tell you something? Can I just be honest with you tonight? Some of us got goals. Some of us got dreams. Some of us got aspirations. Some of us got things that we want to accomplish in life, but we've been so comfortable sitting on here that it's been death of our goals. It's been death of our dreams because we've gotten so comfortable with the situation that's around us. We've just gotten comfortable. Oh, it's always going to be, you don't understand, Pastor Phil, it's always going to be this way. Well, in order to change, we got to get uncomfortable. You got to do something that you've never done. There's a blessing in being uncomfortable. I hear people say all the time, they're like, I want different relationships in my life. Well, you're going to have to get uncomfortable. If you go to the same spot all the time, nonstop, guess who you're gonna see? The same people all the time, nonstop. You're gonna have to do something different than you haven't done before. Well, I would like to change something in my life. The Bible says in Romans 12:2, you gotta renew your mind daily, which means you gotta change the way you think. You gotta change your mindset. It's always going to be that way if you think it's always going to be that way. So you can get upset because it's comfortable. People say all the time, they're like, I love to join a connect group. I love to be a part of a connect group, but they're very uncomfortable. Yeah. And I was like, why? They're like, it's people. But then they'll say, can you pray for me? For what? Different relationships. Well, in order to get different relationships, you're gonna have to get uncomfortable. Do you know how uncomfortable it was for Victoria to beg me to marry her? Uncomfortable. I have the mic, so it's true. It's not at all. But it's uncomfortable. You gotta get around people to get on, you gotta be uncomfortable. You gotta meet people. It's that awkward stage in meeting with people. And this is what I tell people, if you don't like the connect group you're in, here's a crazy thing, join a different one. It's like serving. When people are like, I want to get involved in the church, I need to meet people in the church, I'm like, cool, why don't you serve? And they're like, it's very uncomfortable to serve. And I get it. It is uncomfortable to serve. You're having a bad day, you're serving, you're doing your deal, and somebody comes in, you're making coffee, and they're like, this is wrong. And you're like, you know who else is wrong? You. You're the person that's wrong. So I get it, but you gotta be uncomfortable to serve. It's uncomfortable. It's easy just to walk in and not do anything. Have you ever been like me and you'll go somewhere and it's easy to point out the faults of everything that's going on? You know what I mean? I literally could coach NBA basketball because when I watch it, I know everything that they're doing wrong. I went to play open gym basketball at Weldon 2 weeks ago, and I thought I was gonna die because my lungs were gonna collapse. Side note, you know what they did to me? This is terrible. So if you're here from that basketball group, judge your heart, because here's what they did to me. I'm not as good as I once was at all, and so what they did was, Kobe was there, so judge your heart, Kobe. They kept putting me in the pick and rolls as the old man to get the mismatch. You know how disrespectful that is to people? And then they got it, and then they would wave everyone else off. And you know how more disrespectful it was? My son sat there and laughed the entire time. Because at his games, I'm like, here's what you need to do. And I'm airballing shots, and he's like, bro. But if you want different relationships, you got to get uncomfortable. And here's the deal. People don't like people who live uncomfortable. I remember when I first got saved, people were like, what are you, some type of Jesus freak? You're going to go to church like 3 times? Every time the doors were open, I was there. They're like, you're going to go to church 3 times? How much do you sin that you go to church 3 times? And I'm like, no, I'm just trying to change my life. I was bound by drugs. I was bound by all kinds of things. And I had to get off of that. So I got to be around the church and I got to be here. And people are like, what are you nuts? My old friends were like, what is wrong with you? Why do you got to go so much? Because people don't like you living uncomfortable. I've had conversations with people and I'm like, hey, why don't you start tithing? And they're like, whoa, easy. I told you I need God to bless me. I'm like, well, how do you plan on God blessing you? Well, I'm gonna play this lotto and I'm gonna hit this 325 million and he's gonna bless me. No, you're not. It's not gonna work. Partly is because I think God knows what we would do with the money, as we all lie to ourselves and we're like, I'll pay off all the churches and I'll do all this. You're gonna move to Aruba and we're never gonna see you again. It's one of those things where it makes people uncomfortable but there's a blessing in that uncomfortable. How many know you continue to keep tithing, God will keep blessing you? So it's uncomfortable to tithe. You ever looked at your finances and you got the bills over here and you got your check over here and you're like, these two need to be reversed. It's uncomfortable. It's not something we want to do. Evangelism, we have the Friends and Family Weekend this weekend. I would encourage you to invite your friends and family. But that's uncomfortable. Mainly is because everybody has those family members that you're like, they need Jesus, but I don't want them with me when they meet him. Oh, I'm the only one out of everybody. You're like, I want God to send a laborer across their path. I just don't want it to be me. Why? Because the minute they start talking, I get annoyed. But maybe there's an uncomfortable of you saying, hey, why don't you come to church with me this weekend? What would happen if you invite friends and family, your coworkers, and they come to church this weekend? What would happen if God did a miraculous change in their life? But it's waiting. Remember I said in Isaiah 119, if you're willing and obedient, you'll eat the good of the land. But they're waiting on us to ask. They're waiting on the invite, but that's uncomfortable. You're like, well, Pastor Phil, I don't know what to say. I was there. Then the worst thing people do is then ask you questions. Ask you questions about the Bible. Ask you questions, well, what about this in the Bible? And you're like, oh, here we go. Well, did Jesus drink? You're like, I don't know. Well, you turn water into wine. I'm like, well, I don't know if he drank it. And like, well, why don't you? And it's like, dude, I don't know. Here's what I realized. This is what I tell people. I don't know, but you should come to church and find out. It's like, well, is Pastor David going to talk about that? Listen, I don't know what Pastor David's going to talk about. But I tell people, just come to church and find out. Just come join me at church. Maybe God will move. But that's uncomfortable to tell people. And when you start living uncomfortable, like I said, people won't like it. Luke 7, verse 39 says, when the Pharisee who had invited him saw this woman, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know what kind of woman is touching him. I'm not going to say that. She's a sinner. I want to say it, but I'm not going to say it. It'd be a great joke. When you start living uncomfortable, it makes people uncomfortable. You ever decided to start working out, and then you start working out and eating right, and then the people that don't want you to work out and eat right because you all just want to be the same size together start looking at you? That one hit home, huh? All right. Judging by the looks of some of you people, you might be looking at the look you're giving me right now, you might be the person that's angry at the person who's working out. But they ever tell you, yeah, they're like, somebody will tell you, it's like, I get up at 4:30 and go work out in the morning. And you ever thought to yourself, you don't need to get up that early. Why are you getting up that early? And like, I work out 3 times a day. And it's like, my God, quit working out so much. Don will be like, oh, I'm like, Don, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I'm working out. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to let you go. right? But it makes other people uncomfortable. Verse 40 says, then Jesus answered his thought. Simon, who was a Pharisee's name, he said to the Pharisee, I have something to say to you. Go ahead, Simon said. And Jesus tells him a little story. He said, a man loaned money to two people, 500 pieces of silver to one, 50 to the other, and he canceled them out. Who do you suppose loved him more for after that? And Simon, who was a genius, said, I suppose the one for whom he canceled the larger debt. And Jesus said, that's right, genius. Way to catch on to that one. That was my translation, but that's kind of how it works. Now listen, I want to tell you this. I'm not downplaying anything that you may be facing in your life that's uncomfortable. I want to be clear about that. There's things that happen in our lives. Maybe you got a bad report. Maybe you're believing God for a healing. Maybe you're believing God that's, you're coming over some type of trauma I'm not downplaying anything that's happened. You ever had something bad happen to you and you felt like you were doing everything right? Right? There's things like that happen in life. Check this out, 1 Peter 1, verse 6. It says, in this you rejoice, though now for a little while, if necessary, you've been grieved by various trials. You ever been grieved by various trials? It's like one thing happens after the next. Just as soon as you get through one, here comes another one. You've been grieved by various trials, right? But he said rejoice. Why? Because it may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. In other words, things will happen, but they'll bring us closer to Jesus, not farther away. There's uncomfortable things that happen, but they're to bring us closer to Christ, not farther away from Christ. They're to bring us closer to Jesus, to see a different side of Jesus. Luke 7, verse 44. I love this verse. Then he turned to the woman. This woman had made mistake after mistake after mistake. She had messed up, but she decided to do something so uncomfortable and wild. And she was behind him. She didn't feel worthy to even get in front of him. She was behind him at his feet. And he turns to her. And he looked at Simon and he said, look at this woman kneeling here. When I entered your home, you didn't offer me water to wash the dust from my feet, but she's washed them with her tears, wiped them with her hair. You didn't greet me with a kiss, but from the time I first came in, she's not stopped kissing my feet. You neglected the courtesy of olive oil to anoint my head, but she has anointed my feet with rare perfume. Her focus was simply Jesus. It was uncomfortable, but her focus was simply him. And here's the blessing on the other side of her uncomfortableness. Verse 47, he said, I tell you her sins, and I love this part. Jesus is the best. He said, I tell you her sins, and they are many. You guys don't find that as funny as I do. I think that's hilarious. She's a woman of the night, and Jesus is like, let's get it all cards out on the table here. Her sins, and there's a lot of them, they've been forgiven because she's shown me much love. But a person who is forgiven little shows little love. And Jesus said to the woman, your sins are forgiven. Verse 50, the blessing on the other side of being uncomfortable. And Jesus said to the woman, your faith has saved you. What's on the other side of you being uncomfortable? There's a huge blessing because it's your faith. That means in the midst of the trial, in the midst of everything that you're going through, in the midst of that fight, in the midst of all these things, on the other side of being uncomfortable, what's being uncomfortable? Uncomfortable is doing things that you haven't done before. Is pushing closer to Jesus than you ever have before. It's evangelizing. It's helping people. It's pushing past all that stuff. It's like, well, Pastor Phil, I do pray. I pray for 4 minutes every single day. We'll try 5 and see what happens. Well, I do read my Bible. I read 1 chapter every day. Read 2 and see what happens. Have a moment where you've got to get uncomfortable, because I promise you there's a blessing on the other side of that. The song that they were singing earlier. I love that song so much because they said, hey, listen, I'm gonna pour my oil on you. I've got nothing. Listen, here's what I've realized in our life. We came in with nothing and we will leave with nothing. We have nothing. And so there's a blessing on the other side of being uncomfortable. There's a blessing on saying, hey, listen, I'm always in this right spot. You want a different relationship? Do something different. I've worked with married couples, and they'll do the same thing over and over and over again, and it's remarkable when you say, okay, well, stop doing that, do something different. Well, that makes me uncomfortable. Well, that's a blessing on the other side of that being uncomfortable. It's the same way in every area of your life. But here's the thing is, we've got to ask God to come in and say, all right, God, I've gotten comfortable in some areas of my life. How many of you will be honest in this room, at RPC, at Ferguson, online right now, and you say, hey, by listening to you tonight, I can tell I've gotten comfortable in some areas of my life. Just for a show of hands, just really quick, who is it? Pretty much all of us. We've all gotten comfortable in different areas of our life. And you're like, well, this message, well, I thought, you're going to come up here and you're going to make us laugh. I'll make you think, you know what I mean? Did Jesus ever make a bad piece of furniture? Anybody? I also thought, if he ever hit his finger, what'd he say? You can think about that and ponder it on your way home. I just had a thought that somebody is Jesus' day, and they're like, oh my God, it's Jesus. He's healing people and everything else. And that person's like, he made a dresser for me that sucked. Is that the Jesus that made that dresser? That thing was terrible. The thing never worked. But there's a blessing on the other side of you being uncomfortable. So our worship team is going to come up here in just a second. And here's what I want you to do. Just for a minute. You only got a couple minutes. We're going to go back into that song that we sang. But here's what I want you to do. This is just a moment between you and God. I don't know anything about your life. This sermon was probably to me more than anybody else. So it's just about me. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to take the next couple minutes. Stand up to your feet. Don't worry about the person that's around you. You got to get uncomfortable for a second. And just have this moment between you and Jesus. Just have this moment that says, all right, God, where have I gotten comfortable in my life? Have I gotten comfortable in my finances? Have I gotten comfortable in my evangelism? Have I gotten comfortable in my prayer life? Have I gotten comfortable in my walk with you? Have I just gotten so comfortable in life that I need to get uncomfortable in certain areas?
Hey, thank you for watching Faith Church on YouTube, and I want you to subscribe so you can know whenever we go live and post new content. You can also comment below and let us know if the message spoke to you. When you're watching, also know that we want to pray for you. We want to know what's going on in your world, so you can comment below and we'll pray for you. Thanks again for watching on YouTube, and we'll see you next time.